So I'm Alicia with Hustle with Aloha, and I'm excited to have here with me today Brandon Halbert. He is the owner of Halbert Insurance Services. Brandon has been a Florida native his entire life, and he was born in Melbourne, Florida, graduating from University of Florida in 2019 with a bachelor's in finance. He is a licensed health and life agent for insurance, and he has a focus on group and individual health insurance. So he's excited to continue his passion of helping individuals, families, and businesses find quality, affordable coverage. And I'm excited to have him here today because me, as an entrepreneur and a lot of small business owners out there, are so foggy about the process of like getting health insurance for themselves as individuals and their team and stuff. So Brandon has let me invite him on and pick his brain. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you, Alicia. Happy to be here.
Yay. So you mentioned businesses. So do you work with really like how do you go about having a small business or like a solopreneur getting health insurance? I feel like that's just an intimidating place. Where do you start with that?
Well, I first start off by, explaining what the market kind of entails. So it's a lot different than working for a company that offers you health insurance. Typically, they'll boil it down to two or three options that you can choose from as an employee. Being self-employed or a small business owner means that the market is way more expanded. You have to go out and find your own insurance. You have to check to make sure that your doctors are in network, your hospitals are in network. If you have medications you take, you obviously want to make sure those are covered. So there's a lot more that goes into it, and it's not so much just a cookie cutter, one size fits all health insurance plan that's being offered to you by an employer. There's the Affordable Care Act market, and there's also the private market that you have to kind of navigate. So when I say Affordable Care Act, that was passed back when Obama was president, and that is geared towards people who qualify for government assistance based on their income, and also those who have serious ongoing pre-existing conditions. Now, if you're
Wow.
someone in a lower income bracket, you can qualify for a tax credit towards your plan, which helps keep your premium low. The downside of that is, you can incur tax penalties if you misstate your income, which is certainly more prevalent amongst those who are self-employed because your income can be volatile. There's also more network
What is that?
limitations with the HCA just because they're HMOs instead of PPOs.
So for
Go ahead.
I mean that if you don't mind, let's dig a little bit deeper on that topic, the Affordable Care Act and the tax credit and stuff. So if you guess your income as which is not hard to do for a lot of industries. And you
Yeah.
said penalty later, is there like fees on top of it, or is it just like a reconciling of what you would have, the discount you would have not gotten or something like that? Or is there an actual penalty for misguessing your income?
Yeah, so there is an actual penalty, and it's based on the severity by which you did misrepresentate your income.
Oh,
So, if it's double what you put on the application, you'll have to pay back X amount. And it kind of depends on, that specific policy, if it's a family or just an individual, and what bracket you fall into. But it does also incur interest. So if you've been misstating your income for a couple years and they go back and audit that, they can see that you've been incorrectly stating your income for that amount of time and pay back 2 or 3 years worth of tax penalties with interest. Kind of like you
okay.
touched on for self-employed real estate agent. That's probably the
Yeah,
number one I
so
see
hard.
that get hit with that penalty because they might not sell a lot of houses quarters 1 through 3 of the year, and then quarter 4 they sell a ton of houses and they get a huge commission check, and all of a sudden their income is double or
Well,
triple
how
what
can
they.
you predict that as an agent too? Like it's too
Exactly.
hard.
So I
Hmm.
try to make sure I, let the client understand that that's a possible risk. Sometimes it's worth taking that risk because you're getting such a low premium. But at
Mm,
the end of the day, it's important to understand that that can happen to self-employed people.
right. So if you overestimate your income as a real estate agent, do you get that money back later, or are you just
You'll
kind of like
typically get a tax rebate on your taxes the following year.
without, well, of course, without interest, I'm sure, because
Yes. Oh,
it's
yeah.
the government. But
Yep.
interesting. So would you say it's probably better to err on the side of overestimating than underestimating?
In some cases, yeah. I mean, if you're someone who pays yourself a salary through your business and you're pretty sure you know exactly what you're going to be paying yourself all year long, there's not much risk there. But like
Right.
I
That's
said,
like a
for
non-issue. Yeah.
commission-based jobs, real estate agents, it can be so volatile. Yeah, it doesn't hurt to give yourself a little bit of a cushion and pay a higher premium for the year just in case.
Okay. And just so people who are, watching are aware, so the Affordable Care Act, I remember last time we spoke, there are certain like income brackets where it's applicable or ones at which like don't even bother filling out all that paperwork because you're probably not going to get a discount. So just sort of what you see is what you get. Where did those, are there some numbers that you can throw out for us?
Well, it's pretty situation specific. So, it's your age is factored in, your family size is factored in. So, if you're a 30-year-old male and you're making 30,000 per year, you're probably going to get a pretty low cost plan. As that income creeps up, the price of the plan creeps up as well. So, if your income goes from 30K to let's say 40K, that subsidy might go down by $50 to $100. It depends on the state and your family size and all that. There's a lot of factors that go into it. There's a calculator on the quote page where you literally, and I do the same thing, just punch in the ages, the genders, the family size, and the income, and it populates those plans with the tax credit
On the
applied to
quote
them.
page.
So there's no guesswork with it.
Cool. After this or in the chat or something, can you give me the URL to the quote page and I'll include it so people can go there? Is that on the marketplace that you're talking about?
Yes, you can go through healthcare.gov, which is the official government website. There's also Health Sherpa, which is what I use. It's just, in my opinion, a more user-friendly platform, just easier to navigate, basically. And you can get all the same plans through healthsherpa.com.
Oh, okay. Cool. Um, all right. And then so for what about if you are a solopreneur, independent business owner, entrepreneur, what is the process? Like at what point can you put other people on your plan? Like, do you have to be married? If you have kids, like, does it make sense to do that? Or is it better to get on your spouse's insurance if they have a 9 to 5? Or let's talk about some of those scenarios maybe.
So again, it really depends. I mean, if you are married, yes, you can put your spouse on your Affordable Care Act plan. You don't always have to be married to put a spouse on a plan that's not on the Affordable Care Act. So I refer to that as the private market. So those are plans that are outside the scope of the Affordable Care Act. And you can get those private plans, which are typically going to be less expensive than the Affordable Care Act, so long as you're not getting a tax credit. So a full priced ACA plan will typically be more expensive than, a medically underwritten private plan, which basically medically underwritten means that they check to make sure you're relatively healthy and then they approve the policy for you based on that. Those are typically PPOs, so you have access to more doctors and hospitals. But in terms of going on a spouse's employer plan, again, it just depends because sometimes a job or a company might not cover dependents on that plan. So, if your wife works for a company and, you're a self-employed husband, let's say that company that your wife works for doesn't cover the cost of dependents or only covers a small percentage of it. And it just depends on the company whether or not they want to cover that amount. It might be more affordable to get your own plan and not go on your spouse's work coverage.
Interesting. Okay. So I guess you just kind of have to like use the calculator or talk to someone like you to punch in the
Yeah.
numbers and stuff like that.
And
Um,
that's why working with the broker, not to cut you off there, working
oh,
with a
yeah.
broker is so important because, I can check all the carriers in the market to make sure that, you're not paying too much on your spouse's plan because there might be something more affordable out there for you. And, me personally, I don't charge a broker fees. So really using me doesn't cost the client anything. The insurance company pays me a commission directly. It'd be the same price whether you went directly to a carrier to purchase a plan as it would to go through me. So, it never hurts to at least speak to a broker, get their opinion, let them show you what's out there. There's no harm in that.
My gosh. I mean, when we had that conversation, I was so grateful because these kinds of things, like once you have more than two acronyms in a sentence, like I get overwhelmed and I don't remember. There's just so many levers that you can pull. And I can really see the benefit of having a conversation with you and being being like, okay, well, I'm the kind of person that like goes to the doctor all the time, or I rarely go, or I have
Yeah,
certain alternative care things that I really want to do, or prescriptions or stuff like that. And then you can be like, oh, well, you definitely want this one, or you don't want that one, or these are some options. Um,
exactly.
it really is amazing the amount of knowledge that you have rolling around in your brain that's available to
Well,
people.
it's all I do. I do it all day, every day. So, I'm someone who always likes to defer to experts in whatever field they're in. I don't go to you know, a landscaper for medical advice, for instance. You use people based on what they do because they live that life every single
Yeah.
day, and they're going to have the most experience at the end of the day. And that's not to say that sometimes you might not talk, you might talk to a broker who might not know completely what he's talking about. So it never hurts to get a few different opinions, speak to a few different brokers, see if they're saying the same thing. If people are deviating what they're telling you, maybe do some own research on your own after those conversations that once you've gotten the information from them.
That's a
So,
good point. I
never,
mean,
just like a doctor, never hurts to get a second opinion.
totally. But I mean, I think it makes sense to start with you because I have filled out, I mean, I guess you could probably like go to the calculator and fill it out to get an initial idea. And then if you're like me and you get intimidated quickly, then they can have a conversation with you to like understand some options and then go back and do some individual research on their
Yeah.
own.
And another thing I'll say real quick is it's extremely important to make sure that whoever you are talking to is an actual independent broker. There's a lot of
Yeah,
captive agents out there who frame themselves as independent when in reality they're really not.
they work
So
for a particular insurance
yeah,
company. Yeah.
exactly. And they can only write plans through that agency or through that one health insurance company.
Yeah.
And sometimes that plan they're selling might be the best thing for you. But to only see a small percentage of what's available in the market is really doing yourself a disservice because there's a pretty good chance there's something better out there, and that agent is going to be you know biased in the fact that he's trying to sell you a plan because that's how he puts food on the table. So making
Right.
sure you're working with someone who is licensed with every carrier out there is pivotal in my opinion.
Is that common that independent agents are licensed with everybody, or is it usually like a few of them, or like how would people make sure that they're working with somebody who's independent?
You can just ask them to show you, a few different contracts. So if you ask, hey,
Mm.
let me see your license or contract with United, Cigna, and Aetna. If they're not able to show you at least two contracts with a couple carriers, that means they're not licensed because that means they're not independent because a captive agent by its nature can only work with one specific insurance company.
Wow. So is it not awkward to ask them if you can see their license or contract with, is that,
I wouldn't, when people ask me, I've never had the question of to show me several different contracts. Had people ask me to show me their license,
mm,
but I wouldn't say it's a bad thing to ask or awkward because it's a really important decision. I mean, choosing a health
yeah,
insurance plan is the difference between, possibly going bankrupt when the wrong thing happens to you health wise and being in a, secure financial position. So it's an important thing to do. And, it's not the most exciting topic in the world for people to talk about. And, it's usually the last thing people want to do, but it is super important, in my opinion, and I'm biased because I sell health insurance. It's more important than car insurance and life insurance and home
yeah.
insurance
Well, you're
because,
more likely to get sick than you probably already get hit by a car. So,
yeah. And the most
yeah,
important thing is your health. That's what, keeps you
right.
walking around and doing your
Yeah,
thing. So, I view that as the top the list when it comes to insurance importance.
I agree. And so, I'm biased. I'm thinking of like entrepreneurs and small business owners because that's me and those are my clients. But
Yep.
also, some employees, they don't get health insurance through their employer, or they might be a 1099 contractor. Is that,
Mhm.
would they approach this differently than a small business owner, or is that the same like sort of boat?
It depends if they're wanting to. I wouldn't say approach it differently. If you're a small business owner and you want to provide coverage to your employees, that's going to be a different ball game.
Mm,
If you're
yeah.
an independent contractor or a W-2 employee who doesn't have access to a employer-sponsored plan, you're going to be looking for just individual plans. But if you're looking to provide coverage to employees as a small business owner, then yes, you're looking at a different category because now you're looking at group plans, whereas a 1099 independent contractor is looking at just individual plans.
Right. And I guess if you're a solopreneur or an entrepreneur and you are like a team of one, it's the same as if you were a 1099 contractor, really, from a health
Yeah.
insurance standpoint, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So then if you were, when does, like, what's the smallest group plan? One employee, 10 employees, five, or like when does it make sense to like go over to that versus compensating your employees and having them get their own? Or how do people navigate that?
Um, That's a difficult question to answer in the sense that it kind of depends on what state you're in. So sometimes,
Okay.
you know, and also how much money your employees make. You know, sometimes it might be beneficial to just stipend them money and let them get their own plan through the marketplace or elsewhere. And that's why, again, working with a broker is important because I can show you both routes. I can show you what it's going to cost the business to provide a employer-sponsored plan, and I can show you what it's going to cost you and the employee to get their own plan privately or through the marketplace. So again, it's like with everything else, it's situational dependent. Whereas, you know, if you're working for a company, they just give you these three options, and that's what you
Right.
pick. So I would say certainly working with a broker to help dissect what the best route is important.
That's interesting. So I never thought about that. So if a small business owner, if they're the state that they're in and like the typical pay level of their employees, it makes more sense for them to provide a stipend for the employees to use toward health insurance. Is that like a Cigna debit card, or is it like literally just money that is added onto their checking account every month with their paycheck, or how does that usually work?
Yeah, so they can just basically pay it through their payroll company to the employee and increase their salary, or they can um, basically, yeah, if they're going to get their own insurance, yes, they would just stipend them the amount through the payroll
Okay.
company and they would take care of all that.
That's interesting.
Obviously, if the employer is getting a true group plan, then they can, if they're not paying 100% of the premium for the employees, they can take
Mm,
that out of their paycheck as their portion of the premium.
gotcha. And that's often the case, right? For a group plan, the employer pays part of it and then they share that cost with the employee.
Yeah, typically, sometimes the employer will pay 100% of the plan, so the employee won't pay anything. It just kind of depends on what the employer wants to do. Some carriers have thresholds where they require the employer to pay a certain percentage of the premium, sometimes 50%, for instance. And then the employer sometimes will not cover anything towards the dependents of that employee. So kind of like I mentioned
I
earlier,
see that.
sometimes
Yeah.
they'll cover 50% of the employee and their dependents. Sometimes they'll cover 100% of the employee and
But
only
not their
50%
dependent,
of the
something.
dependents,
Yeah.
or not at all. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's interesting. If you were going to start a company and you knew you were going to have a team or you knew you were going to get independent insurance, when's a good time to start looking into that? Are there like enrollment periods or what does that ramp up process look like?
So if they're going to go the route where they want to get individual plans on their own, then open enrollment for the Affordable Care Act is November 1st through January 15th. So they can enroll in a plan between those two dates. If they're going to get a traditional group plan through the business, then they can do that anytime throughout the year. Also, if they're going to get a plan on the private side of the market, they can also do that anytime throughout the year. So I would say the best time to start looking for plans for your employees and your business is as soon as you think you're financially viable to pay whatever portion of the premiums you want to pay. And what, if that factors into your budget, go ahead and start looking now, because it's a lot different than purchasing an individual plan for yourself when you're talking about a business, because instead of a premium of a few $100s a month, you're talking multiple thousands of a month
Zeros
per
on that.
year.
Yeah.
A much bigger decision. So you want to make sure you talk to, maybe at least a couple brokers, get quotes from two different people, two or three different people, see what's out there and start looking into it, because with my individual clients, the sales cycle is typically, anywhere from the first day we talk to, let's say, 8 to 12 months. Businesses, that can be a much bigger decision. So it takes longer. The majority of my business clients, they can take up to a year to 2 years until they've actually enrolled in a policy, just because it's a much bigger chunk coming out of their uh, their business. So,
Absolutely.
they want to make sure they're doing the right thing, which is completely understandable. I do have businesses who are like, let's get this going ASAP. But a lot of times, especially in this economy with, inflation being higher, um, businesses are, making sure they're making that right decision.
Okay. And a couple times you've mentioned the private side of the market. I'm, excuse my ignorance, but like, what does that mean?
So when I say private side, I basically just mean outside the scope of the Affordable Care Act. So
Oh,
those plans can be anything from short-term medical plans to ERISA compliant group plans for individuals and self-employed people. So basically anything that's not subsidized by the government,
mm,
I would consider to be a private market plan. Generally, they're underwritten, meaning that the carriers are going to ask some medical questions or check prescription history, and the rates are typically less expensive, matched up to a full price ACA plan just because they're discounted based on health.
what's
So,
ACA? Sorry.
I'm sorry, the Affordable Care Act.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. So the Affordable Care Act is the same thing as Obamacare, the marketplace, the exchange. When I say that, it's subsidized plans by the government.
Gotcha. Be
That's
nice if they
specific.
just picked one name.
Sure, yeah. I think they were calling it Biden Care for a bit when
Oh God.
he first took office. So several different names for it, but private market is basically just anything outside of that.
Anything
And
where you're
again,
getting a little bit of assistance. So would the
yeah.
same plan be offered on the Affordable Care Act stuff and a private side? And it's just like the same plan, the same benefits are just different prices? Or is it only some plans are only on one and they're only on the other? Is that question
Uh,
makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Generally, the same plans that are offered on the Affordable Care Act are not also offered outside the
They're
Affordable
not
Care Act.
offered usually.
There's a specific set of plans that are offered through the exchange, and there's quite a bit of options through the Affordable Care Act in most states. Some states only have one carrier operating. A lot of areas in Florida have almost 8 to 10 carriers operating. So
Wow.
there's certainly, it varies by state, but you'll never find an identical plan on the ACA that's on the private market as well.
Gotcha. That's
You can
interesting.
find very similar plans, but typically not with the same name, the same plan code, the exact same copay as deductible out-of-pocket max.
Gotcha. And if I know you talked a little bit about, if if it's really important to somebody that they keep their doctor, how
Mhm.
would they go about looking? Is that something that you can help them figure out what insurance plans they need to be on to be able to maintain their consistency of care with the same provider?
Yeah. Yeah. So with any plan, I always check to make sure their doctors are in network before I write that plan for them. I'm not just going to go out and recommend a plan for someone without checking to make sure that their specific providers and hospitals are in network because, that's obviously important. People want to keep their
How they're going to
doctor.
use it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're doing an Affordable Care Act plan, if it's an HMO or an EPO, you typically have to get a doctor assigned to you, which you can pick your doctor after you enroll, and you can go to their carrier website and type in who you want your primary care provider to be, and then that's your primary care doctor. You would have to get approval to go to a different one. Same thing with specialists. So if you have an HMO plan or an EPO, you have to get a referral because I'm sorry, with an EPO you don't, but with an HMO you do have to get a referral to see a specialist. PPOs, that's not the case. You do not need to pick out a primary care doctor. You don't need to get approval or a referral to see a specialist. You can just go to any doctor you want. Still important to make sure that they're in network, obviously, because that's what maximizes your benefits, but you certainly have more flexibility with a PPO than you otherwise do with an HMO.
Interesting. And if you don't have a doctor, like if you have an HMO, do they just pick one for you or how does that work?
Yeah, they'll actually just assign one to you if you don't actually go in and manually pick a doctor. And then you'll have to go in and contact the insurance company after the fact to get them to change it to your desired doctor.
Gotcha. And you mentioned EPO. Would you mind explaining the difference between EPO, HMO, and PPO? I think a lot of people are familiar with HMO and PPO, but what's EPO?
So an EPO is another kind of network you typically find on the marketplace. The Affordable Care Act stands for Exclusive Provider Organization. So it's the same as an HMO in the sense that there's no out-of-network coverage, but the difference is you don't need a referral to go see a specialist.
Mm,
At HMO, you also have no out-of-network coverage, but you also need a referral to see a specialist. A PPO, you do have out-of-network coverage, and you don't need a referral to see a specialist. So that's kind of the difference there. There's also another network called POS. It stands for Point of Service. A lot of United Healthcare's group plans operate on that network. It's kind of like a hybrid between a PPO and an HMO. You still have nationwide coverage like you do with a PPO. You don't need a referral to see a specialist. So that one's pretty similar to a PPO. So I kind of rank them in, from best to worst. PPO, POS, and then HMO and EPO are kind of a toss-up. They both have pros and cons to them.
Gotcha. So is there anything that we haven't talked about that you really wish that more people knew about, that, small businesses and entrepreneurs in particular, that we should cover?
Um, Yeah, I mean, a lot of times small businesses can tag on, supplemental plans or ancillary products to kind of bolster your coverage. Such as accident riders and critical illness riders, hospitalization riders. And so, if you match up a plan that has copays for certain things and the price of that versus maybe a slightly higher deductible with a rider, a lot of times they can save money by kind of combining two different plans rather than just going with that straight plan with just flat copays for everything. So that's always something to look at too. But in terms of picking a plan for small businesses, I would just say kind of drill home the fact that it's really important to work with a broker. You
Can't
know,
even imagine trying to navigate this on your own.
yeah, I mean, if you go online, do your own research, you might find the plan that's best for you. But at least speaking to someone who can show you different things, and make sure you are, aware of the nuances between different plans. I say that's really imperative to do.
That's amazing. Um, so I meet a lot of small business owners that are, um, I guess you could say they're transitioning from a 9 to 5 to starting their own business. And so
Yeah.
they're used to having their health insurance provided for. What would you say would be a reasonable amount to budget for as like a solopreneur who is, maybe they don't even know how much it has been costing because their employer was paying for it this whole time. What would you
Yeah.
think? A range or something, or starting at, or
Well, it's hard to speak on someone's budget because, like I've said several times, and I hate to be a broken record, but it's really situation specific. So, one person's budget might not be obtainable compared to someone else's budget. And if someone has a lower income, they obviously can't budget as much as someone who has an higher income. But that person with a lower income possibly might qualify for assistance through the Affordable Care Act. So they might not really have to worry about budgeting a whole lot. So it's really important to look at both sides. If you have a high income, and you're not going to qualify for government assistance, the general price range for plans for, a middle-aged male or female, I would say typically about 300 or 400 to 700 or 800, depending on the level of benefits you want, and depending on the carrier and also the state you're in. That's kind of the range I typically see in most states. Some states are more expensive than that. So that's dependent on that. And then for someone who has a lower income, they don't really have to budget too much because they're going
right.
to get tax credit,
It's
most
yeah,
likely. Again, though, because they're not going to be self-employed, they just have to be really careful with what they're projecting for their income to avoid any kind of, tax penalties when they reconcile that at the end of the year.
that's interesting. And so in terms of the tax penalties, like, and reconciling your income, does the government approach the individual for that, or is the individual, or is it their responsibility to log in at a certain time of year to see what they reported and like file a form or something, or what does that process look like?
Yeah, so in the end of the year, they'll be issued a Form 1095, which they can go on and they fill that out, and that's how they reconcile their premium tax credits with their income, and they just file that with their taxes, and then they either get a rebate or they'll be penalized or nothing will happen at all. Sometimes that penalty will just be taken out of their tax return, but that's how they do it. They get issued that. Usually they get sent that in the mail, and it's also uploaded to their portal through healthcare.gov or Health Sherpa.
Oh, okay. So there's like a trigger, like they get issued that form, they get it in the mail or something like that.
Yeah, at the end of the year.
Okay, that's good to know.
or typically in the beginning of the year after so
That's
like if you
a while.
plan, yeah, a plan in 2023, they'll get issued that 1095 form typically the beginning of 2024.
Gotcha, the following year.
Yep.
Um, and so I'm curious, we're in Florida. Um, what are there anything, is there anything that as Floridians we should know about navigating that's unique in our state or different for us as opposed to other states?
Um, Not necessarily. We have a lot more options in Florida than a lot of states. Like on the Affordable Care Act, we have quite a few carriers to choose from, so there's a lot more options. But in terms of Florida versus other states, I don't really take a different approach. I still, follow the same steps I do with anyone else in any other state, making sure their doctors are in network, their medications are covered, comparing different plans and benefit levels. So it's basically the same thing as I would do with anyone else.
Okay. It's really, I never thought about it, but that's pretty cool that you can help people in any state. Like even if someone moves or if like we're working together and I want you to help my friend in Maryland, I can just refer you. I know that you'll be able to take just as good care of them as if we were in the same state. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm licensed in 39 states, so the
Okay.
majority of states. Some states are state-based exchanges, meaning you have to actually live there to write plans.
Huh.
But for the vast majority of states, anyone can license in any state. So yeah, I do that because I want to make sure that if my clients do move, they can keep me as their broker. And if I get referrals from existing clients who live in another state, I can help them as well.
That's awesome. Um, I'm super curious, if you don't mind my asking, what's your favorite thing about doing this for a living?
Uh, I'd say probably just knowing that, not to sound arrogant, but that I'm an expert in it and that I know in my heart deep down that I'm helping each person I talk to, even if I might not be able to help them, they have the best plan possible for them. At least I can reassure them of that fact. And
Mm.
just talking to different people in different states, people who are starting businesses, people who are leaving jobs and need to find something and need help because they don't know how to navigate the market. Just helping people is basically the biggest reward that I can get out of this job.
That's so cool. And I love it that you the way your business is set up, you don't take a commission. So you feel like people don't feel like that tension to call you.
Mhm.
You don't feel like pulled in one direction versus the other. You can truly just live that out. And that's really cool.
Well, I do get a commission from the insurance companies, but I don't charge an additional fee from the client. So some brokerages will charge the client like a broker fee, so an extra,
I know you said
certain
that. Yeah, that's
percentage on
interesting.
top of whatever the insurance company's already paying them. I don't do that. If someone enrolls in a plan through me, the insurance company takes care of me, not the client. So, and then being a broker and being independent, it doesn't matter what plan or what carrier I write for someone. So I'm never going to be biased in, what direction I'm pointing someone. So, if I talk to someone, at least I know that I don't have any, subconscious biases that I need to
Totally.
write this plan in
Yeah,
order to feed my family. I can write with any carrier, so there's no need to push one particular thing. I just know I'm doing the right thing for them.
that's awesome. Yeah, and on both sides, like there's no pressure on their side or your side. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. Well, if someone listening or watching wants to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do that?
They can go to my website at www.halbertins.com. That's HALB as in boy, ERTINS, so abbreviation for insurance.com. I have a contact form on there. You can fill that out. It goes to my email. You can also go to my Facebook page and shoot me a PM, and that's at Halbert Insurance Services, LLC. So either of those ways. Or they can contact you if they know you, Alicia, and you can put them in touch with me. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I'll
that's the
put your
best way to reach me.
information to below the video so they have it easy.
Great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I know it seems like just normal, regular stuff to you, but it's really, really valuable for those of us who are new to this and feeling a little overwhelmed by it. So thank you so much for your time today.